Ever wondered why things cost the way they do, especially since the inauguration of Washington's new sheriff in January? Well, a huge part of the backstory involves the tussle between the world's two economic titans, the US and China. The US has just dropped a tariff bomb on China, adding billions of dollars worth of extra taxes on all Chinese imports, from vehicles to mineral resources and technologies. But China saw it coming, and they've got a plan already in motion. While Washington is raising walls, Beijing is building bridges all over the world. And the real question is, who's going to win this economic tug-of-war? China is thinking bigger and playing a global game that could change the balance of world power for years to come. This is chess on a worldwide scale. So what would China actually do? They can build entire supply chains that avoid the West. They can fund development in countries that Washington overlooks. They can set their own trade rules, their own digital standards, and maybe one day, their own version of the global financial system. And that's exactly what they're doing. The US says they want to protect American workers and manufacturers. They accuse China of flooding the world with cheap, heavily subsidized products. However, China wants to challenge the US dollar. More trade is now being done in the Chinese yuan, especially with countries under US sanctions. But let's start from the beginning. The US recently raised tariffs on a wide range of Chinese products, including electric vehicles, batteries, steel, solar panels, and computer chips. These aren't just small increases. For example, the tariff on Chinese electric vehicles went from 25% to 100%. Right now, the tariff on all goods coming into the US from China has reached 145%. Many believe China is overproducing many of these goods with heavy government support, then flooding the global market with cheap exports. And this makes it hard for US companies to compete fairly. But China isn't just reacting emotionally or panicking. They've seen this coming for a while, and they've been building a much bigger plan quietly. If you thought China's just throwing up some highways and railroads, think again. This is not your average construction project. This is one of the boldest moves any country could have thought of. It's called the Belt and Road Initiative, and it's China's mega plan to quietly and powerfully reshape the world's economy. Launched in 2013, over 150 countries have signed up. That's more than 3/4 of the planet. We're talking about massive infrastructure in Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, and even parts of the Middle East. Roads in Kenya, trains in Laos, ports in Greece, bridges in Bangladesh. If there's a map, China probably has a project on it. And it's not just about moving goods, it's also about influence. By funding and building these massive projects, China is building long-term relationships. Some might call it generous, others might call it debt trap diplomacy. China lends the money, provides the labor, supplies the tech, and if the country can't pay it back, China gets the leverage. One famous case, Sri Lanka had to lease out its deep sea port to China for 99 years after failing to repay the loan. So what's the big picture? Beijing isn't just laying concrete, it's laying claim to future power, forming a massive network of countries that depend on it economically, while creating new trade routes that don't rely on the West. If the US built its power with aircraft carriers and the dollar, China's trying to do it with railroads, ports, and digital payments. And here's the twist, it's actually working. Over time, this creates strong trade ties and political influence. These aren't just allies in name, they become partners who depend on China. At the same time, China is also focusing hard on reducing its own dependence on Western markets and technology. This is part of their Made in China 2025 plan. The goal is to become self-sufficient in key industries like semiconductors, artificial intelligence, green energy, robotics, and pharmaceuticals. China is investing billions into local companies to build up these sectors. They don't want to rely on foreign tech giants or supply chains anymore. And that's a smart move if more countries start imposing restrictions like the US just did. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. China is also going full throttle into the electric vehicle game. You've probably heard of Tesla, right? Well, meet BYD, China's EV giant that's already beating Tesla in some markets. Yep, BYD sold more electric cars than Tesla last year, and not just in China. They're popping up all over Europe, Southeast Asia, South America, and Africa. And get this, even if the US slams the door on Chinese EVs with tariffs, it might not hit China that hard. Why? Because they've already diversified their customer base. Plus, Chinese automakers aren't just shipping cars overseas, they're actually building factories abroad, so they can sell globally without needing to export from China. Mind you, that's not all. China is also getting cozy with countries that don't exactly follow Washington's lead. The likes of Russia, Iran, Brazil, and even Saudi Arabia. These nations may not see eye to eye with the US on politics or trade, but they're more than happy to do business with Beijing. Collectively, they're often called the Global South, a group of countries that are looking for new options beyond the US and Europe. And China's saying, "Come on, we got you." And here's another big move: money power. Nowadays, most global trade runs on the US dollar, which gives America a ton of financial influence. But China's trying to change that. They're encouraging more countries to use the yuan instead of the dollar. That might sound small, but it's a massive financial shift. If enough countries switch to the yuan for trade, the dollar loses some of its grip, and China gains a lot more control. They've already started doing this with countries like Russia and Brazil, and they're encouraging more of it through trade deals and currency swaps. So, what could this all mean for the world? If China succeeds in building strong alliances, making its own technology, and reducing reliance on Western systems, the global power map could shift. In fact, this is already happening. China produces 75% of the world's lithium-ion batteries. Yeah, you heard that right. Nearly 3/4 of the batteries that power everything from your phone to your electronic car come from China. But it gets even crazier. China also controls over half of the world's processing capacity for essential materials like lithium, cobalt, and graphite. These are the building blocks for pretty much every electric vehicle and battery on the planet. Speaking of electric vehicles, Chinese brands are dominating that market too. In 2024, they accounted for a whopping 62% of global EV sales. That's more than half the electric cars sold worldwide. And it's not just about the cars, it's the batteries driving this shift. China's two giants, CATL and BYD, alone produce more than half of all electric vehicle batteries globally, including a new super battery that charges for only 5 minutes. This makes it 4 times faster than Tesla's. So, when you see a new EV on the road, chances are it's powered by Chinese tech. But here's the mic drop moment. China is also Africa's largest trading partner. They've completely transformed their presence in the continent by investing heavily in infrastructure projects, roads, railways, power plants, and growing their economic influence across the whole of Africa. They're also the biggest lenders to many African nations. That's not all. China is part of an RCEP and the US is not. The RCEP is a group of 15 countries generating 1/3 of the world's economic output. They are also the world's largest free trade pact covering Asia-Pacific nations. The US might still be a major player, but not the only one calling the shots. Undoubtedly, in the future, more countries might turn to China for trade, loans, technology, and leadership. China could create its own version of global systems, its own financial networks and trade routes, and bring a large part of the world with it. This doesn't mean a sudden collapse of American power, but it does mean a slow and steady challenge. A world where countries don't automatically follow Washington's lead. A world with 2 or more centers of power, instead of just 1. And this is why the current tariffs matter so much. They're not just about electric cars or solar panels. They're part of a much bigger competition, not just over trade, but over influence, technology, and leadership in the 21st century. So while the US hits hard with tariffs, China is moving quietly and with purpose. And its plan is playing out not just in factories and boardrooms, but in ports, villages, and capitals all around the world. What do you think about China's rise as a global power? Are they really on track to change the balance of power, or will it all blow over soon enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you want to stay updated on all things global trade and economic power shifts, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Catch you in the next video.